The rain started the moment Stella Maxwell's plane touched down at Murtala Muhammad Airport, as if Lagos itself had decided to stage a warning. She watched the sheets of water race down the window, her reflection ghosting over the blurred skyline. It had been 10 years since she last set foot in this city, a place that had taken her mother's laughter, her peace, and now, her father's life. Her phone buzzed as she exited the terminal. The message came from her father's attorney, Henderson Law Chambers. Reading of the will, 3 p.m. Don't be late, Miss Maxwell. She wasn't late, she was furious. By the time she arrived at the firm's sleek office on Victoria Island, she had already decided she didn't care what the man left behind. The father who had ignored every letter, every call, didn't deserve her grief. But when she sat in that mahogany conference room and heard the words, "You are the sole heir to Maxwell Enterprises," the air changed. Then came the clause. "The inheritance," the lawyer said, glancing nervously between his papers, "is contingent upon you being happily married within 30 days. Stella stared. "I'm sorry, what?" He cleared his throat. "Your father believed marriage ensured stability. The company board agreed to honor his wishes." The board, of course. Sharks in designer suits already circling her father's legacy like bloodhounds. Her voice was cold. "So if I'm not wearing a ring in 30 days, the empire my mother helped build goes to strangers?" The lawyer's silence was answer enough. By evening, Stella sat alone in the penthouse her father had owned but never lived in. Lagos glimmered beneath her, Echo Atlantic skyline rising like ambition built on water. She sipped a glass of wine that tasted like regret and thought about her mother, who used to say, "Love is the only inheritance worth fighting for." Love, she muttered bitterly. How poetic. She didn't need love. She needed control. The next morning, headlines blared her father's death beside speculation about Maxwell Enterprises' future. "Will the heiress return?" one asked. "Can the empire survive?" whispered another. Yes, she would return. Yes, it would survive. But not if the board ousted her before she even had a wedding band. That was when she called her assistant in London. "Find me someone reputable in Lagos corporate finance. Someone who needs a deal." Hours later, she found herself attending a legal networking luncheon at the Azure Towers Hotel, the kind of event where men traded companies over canapes. Her navy dress was sharp enough to cut glass, her composure colder than the champagne in her hand. Across the room, laughter rippled, a different kind of sound, low and magnetic. She turned. Jason Khalid. Even in a city full of powerful men, he stood apart. Tall, impeccably dressed, with an energy that silenced conversation without trying. He was known for building empires out of dust, for winning negotiations that others called impossible. But lately, the papers said his Empire Khalid Capital Group was facing a liquidity freeze. Their eyes met across the room, hers assessing, his unreadable. When the luncheon concluded, fate or calculation had them seated at the same small table near the balcony. "Miss Maxwell," he said, his tone smooth but edged. "I didn't expect Lagos's newest heiress to appear so soon." "Neither did I," she replied. "Apparently grief comes with fine print." Jason's smile was slow. "And what does the fine print demand?" She hesitated, then said it. "A husband." He lifted a brow. "Unusual inheritance clause." "Unusual family," she said simply. Jason leaned back in his chair, studying her like a chessboard. "You don't strike me as the type to marry for convenience." "Desperation is a surprisingly persuasive emotion," she said, then added, "I don't plan on staying desperate." He tilted his head. "So you're looking for someone to sign papers, smile for the cameras, and vanish when the ink dries?" "Something like that," he chuckled softly. "And what's in it for your husband of convenience?" She met his gaze without blinking. "Financial assistance. I'm aware Khalid Capital's seaside resort project is at a standstill. I could release part of my inheritance as a short-term loan, interest-free." Jason's amusement faded into curiosity. "You've done your research. I don't make deals blindly." Silence lingered, a battle of calculations disguised as conversation. Finally, he said, "You're offering me a loan in exchange for my name?" "Your reputation," she corrected. "People respect you, fear you. The board will back off if they think I'm Mrs. Jason Khalid." He leaned forward slightly, his voice low. "You think you can buy me, Stella Maxwell?" She didn't flinch. "I think we can buy each other time." Jason's laugh was quiet, dangerous. "And what happens when the board starts asking questions about this fairy tale marriage?" "I can smile," she said, her tone clipped. "And you, Mr. Khalid, can act." He studied her for a long moment, the hum of the city filling the space between them. Then he said, "You know, there's another version of this deal." "Oh?" "One where I agree," he said, voice dipping lower. "But we do this my way." "Your way? For the next year, we make this marriage real." Her heartbeat stumbled. "Define real." "No separate homes, no staged affection," Jason said. "You'll live with me, in my house. We'll give the world something to believe in." "That's absurd," she said. "It's authentic," he countered. "You need to look happily married. I intend to make sure you do." Stella's throat tightened. She had faced journalists, hostile investors, and boardroom betrayals, but Jason Khalid's confidence was a different kind of danger. She rose to leave. "I'll think about it." He stood too, matching her step for step as they walked toward the lobby. "Do that," he murmured. "But remember, Miss Maxwell, some contracts only work when they're signed in fire." The elevator chimed. She stepped in, pulse racing, and turned to face him one last time. "Marry me," she said softly, words tumbling out like a dare, "and I'll make sure you never regret it or forget it." Jason's lips curved into that dangerous half-smile. "Careful, Stella. I never sign deals I don't plan to keep." As the elevator doors closed between them, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls, calm, controlled, composed. But her heart told another story entirely. Outside, Lagos shimmered under the rain, a city built on ambition and second chances. And somewhere in its glittering chaos, two people had just signed the first lines of a deal that would change everything. The headline hit the society pages at dawn, all caps in gold font like a coronation. "Billionaire Jason Khalid marries heiress Stella Maxwell." Below it, a carousel of faultless photographs, her veil drifting like cloudlight, his hands steady at the small of her back. The kiss framed by ivory pillars and tropical leaves. Lagos devoured it before breakfast. Drivers scrolled at red lights. Stylists replayed the kiss while pinning clients' hair. By mid-morning, an influencer had uploaded a slowed montage to piano music, comments spiraling into conspiracy or worship depending on the hour. None of them knew the clause tucked behind the rings. 1 year. Public affection required. Divorce optional. The chapel had been chosen for invisibility, a tiny private sanctuary on Banana Island, easily mistaken for a wealthy family's guest villa. Inside, the air smelled faintly of jasmine and old wood. White orchids spilled over marble steps. Sunlight made small geometric windows on the aisle runner. It was beautiful without spectacle, the kind of place where a sound carried like a secret. There were 12 guests, 2 lawyers, and a priest whose calm had seen worse bargains dressed as devotion. Stella wore a matte silk slip gown with a sheer cathedral veil, her hair swept into an effortless knot that had taken 3 people in an emergency steamer. She held nothing. Her hands felt steadier when they were empty. Jason arrived a minute before noon in a midnight tuxedo, collar open by a daring half-inch that felt like personality rather than rebellion. When he looked at Stella across the aisle, she saw the same composure he wore in boardrooms, that unbothered stillness that made other men study their watches. Only his eyes betrayed a voltage the photographs would miss. The priest cleared his throat gently. "Shall we?" The ceremony was short by design. Vows paired to the bone, poetry traded for clarity. To have and to hold felt like legal language. For richer, for poorer sounded redundant for 2 people whose wealth was either headline or hazard. She caught the way Jason's jaw softened as he repeated each line. Not romance exactly, but a kind of promise to show up, to be present, to treat the stage as real. Do you, Stella Maxwell, take Jason Khaled? I do, she said steady. Do you, Jason Khaled, take Stella Maxwell? I do, he answered, and the two words landed with the weight of a contract he intended to honor. When the priest told him he could kiss his bride, Jason didn't perform. He moved slow enough to ask and sure enough to lead. A perfectly measured kiss that would read as tenderness from the pews and as strategy in the papers. Her breath caught anyway. Applause rolled softly through the chapel. Signatures followed, ink on heavy paper, embossed seals flashing under light. Her attorney slid over a discreet packet, the prenup, the one-year term sheet, the emergency arbitration clause neither of them hoped to use. Jason initialed every page without asking for a pen. They exited through a side courtyard shaded by palms. Somewhere, a photographer caught a candid of Stella laughing at something Jason murmured. It would become the image of the day, happiness, apparently effortless. The car door closed and sealed them in a bubble of cool air and silence. Are you all right? He asked. She exhaled. Ask me in 12 months. His mouth curved. I prefer quarterly reporting. She shook her head, but the line loosened the knot in her chest. The car hummed toward the reception, a private luncheon in a glass-walled room overlooking the lagoon. 30 guests this time, a handful of investors and friends who understood discretion. The table glowed with cut crystal and cream roses. A pianist shaped a melody that sounded like the echo of rain. Toasts were mercifully brief. An old mentor of Jason's said marriage was an acquisition with infinite synergy if managed tenderly. Laughter. Stella's godmother squeezed her hand and whispered, "You look brave." Jason touched his glass and said, "To partnership," and looked at Stella when he said it. Cameras clicked, discreet but relentless. Between courses, rumors slithered in via phones. A gossip account hinted that Stella had offered financial oxygen to a certain billionaire. Another suggested Jason had upgraded from mergers to matrimony to secure a waterfront concession. Stella watched the waves fret the pilings and decided the ocean had better manners than people. They cut a small cake. He fed her a civilized forkful. She did the same for him. A smear of frosting threatened the corner of his mouth. She reached up without thinking and brushed it away with her thumb. The air changed. Heat, brief and bright, like a fuse. He caught her wrist lightly and lowered her hand. "Careful," he murmured, not a warning so much as acknowledgement of something neither of them intended to name. They left before dessert reached the table, an exit orchestrated to seem spontaneous. The drive to his penthouse traced the waterline, Lagos opening to itself in plains of glass and steel. Helicopters pulsed far off like black dragonflies. The buzz of the city climbed and fell. Horns, generators, laughing voices from balconies. Life arguing with itself and winning. In the private elevator, silence pressed again. Stella watched their reflections in the mirrored walls. Two poised strangers in formal wear, each pretending their pulse existed at a reasonable BPM. Jason slipped his key card and the doors parted onto a living space that had the audacity to be beautiful without trying. Floor-to-ceiling windows, pale oak, a long line of books that ran the length of a wall in orderly impatience. Lagos spread in every direction, glitter and grit and sky. He loosened his cufflinks. "Before we go further," he said, "we need to be clear." Stella's spine straightened a fraction. "About the terms." "Yes." He set the cufflinks in a small ceramic dish, then faced her fully. "No separate rooms. We build a real life for a year. People can smell performance." "I can perform for an audience of millions," she said crisply. "I know," he said, "but that's not what I'm asking." A beat. "I'm asking for breakfast and calendars on the fridge and arguments we don't stage. I'm asking for truth." Truth. The words sat between them like a fragile thing and a blade. "And affection?" she asked. "You expect that to be non-negotiable?" "I expect us not to fake what already exists," he said, eyes steady. "Chemistry isn't a press release. We'll respect each other's boundaries. But I won't play stranger with my wife at home and love her for a camera. It's whiplash. It cracks people." She paced to the window, Lagos pooling at her feet like molten city. Her reflection hovered over the skyline. Veil long gone, gown catching the last light. A woman who had talked herself into a labyrinth and discovered the walls were glass. "What about privacy?" she asked. "If I want a night alone?" "Then you say it," he replied, "and I listen. Listening is part of authenticity." She turned. "And if I want to renegotiate the term?" "We meet at 6 months," he said, as if he had already written it in his head. "We say the unsayable. If we're miserable, we end it with dignity. If we're not," his voice thinned into a half-smile, "we stop living like an expiration date is a storm cloud." A gull arced past the glass, white wing aflash against blue. Stella felt the ache of tiredness under her ribs. The day had been a marathon in couture. She looked down at the ring, simple, clean, a narrow band set with a row of stones that caught the light only when it wanted to. It didn't weigh much. It weighed everything. "All right," she said finally. "Absolute authenticity. No staged affection. 1 year." His gaze warmed. "And no separate rooms." She lifted her chin. "Don't push a victory lap." He let the moment breathe. "Guest room's there if you need it tonight," he conceded, nodding down a hallway. "But I hope you won't." Hope. The word balanced on the edge of arrogance and vulnerability. It made him human. She crossed to the kitchen, a minimalist dream with an island long enough to host a minor negotiation summit. She opened a cabinet and found mugs aligned like obedient soldiers. "Coffee?" "It's nearly midnight." "I didn't ask what time it was," she said, reaching for the machine. "I asked if you wanted coffee." He smiled. "Yes." They stood shoulder to shoulder while the machine growled. She realized she knew the rhythm of his breathing already, the slight hitch when he was thinking faster than he wanted to speak. He realized she hummed under her breath when anxious, barely there, a single note like a held line of music. He took his coffee black. She drowned hers in milk and a small rebellion of sugar. They leaned on the counter and watched their city thrum, two generals after a campaign. "Tomorrow," he said, "the interviews begin. We'll give them a narrative that's calm, uninteresting, inevitable." "Boring is a luxury," she agreed. "And tonight?" he asked. "Tonight we hang up the costumes," she said, surprising herself with the softness in her voice. "We take off the armor. We try being human." He studied her, expressions shifting through a handful of secrets and settling on one she couldn't read. "Human I can do." She set her mug down and touched the hem of her veil, which some fairy godmother of a planner had draped over the back of a chair. It felt like the last cloud of a performance evaporating. She lifted it, folded it carefully, and tucked it into a drawer. When she turned, Jason had removed his jacket and bow tie, sleeves rolled to his forearms, looking less like a headline and more like a man. He offered his hand. Not command, not test, invitation. She placed her palm against his, and the contact was lightning without noise. No cameras, no orchestra, just skin, warmth, and the quiet shock of compatibility. "Good night, Stella," he said, voice a shade lower. "Good night, Jason." She walked toward the bedroom corridor with her heart practicing steadiness and her mind composing tomorrow's statements. At the threshold, she paused, glanced back at the man who had just become her husband, and realized the most dangerous truth of all. She had signed a business deal, but walked into a war of hearts. By the 3rd month, their names had become a Lagos brand. The Colin Maxwell marriage, a combination of fascination and envy, filled podcasts, gossip shows, and business panels alike. The tabloids called them Africa's power couple. The investors called them a stabilizing partnership. But inside Jason's penthouse overlooking the lagoon, the truth was quieter and infinitely more complicated. Stella had stopped counting how many times she had been photographed without realizing it. Every morning the tabloids uploaded new images. Jason opening the car door for her at a gala, Stella laughing over dinner, their hands brushing as if by accident. Sometimes she wondered which moments were real and which were just perfectly timed performances. Then there were the mornings the cameras didn't see, the ones that made the performance easier to believe. Jason had a ritual: coffee on the balcony before sunrise, the city still half asleep beneath them. He'd pour her cup exactly how she liked it, light, sweet, with a dash of vanilla syrup, and hand it to her without looking up from his newspaper. Some mornings they'd talk about business, about his new resort on Victoria Island, or the youth coding program Stella was designing for the foundation. Other mornings they said nothing at all, just watched the first boats cut across the lagoon while the world woke up around them. Those were the moments that blurred the line. It was easy to forget the terms of their contract when he brushed her hair off her face absent-mindedly, or when she fell asleep with his laptop open beside her and woke to find a blanket over her shoulders. Their life looked seamless, their partnership flawless, but beneath the polish was a steady hum of secrets, his, hers, and the city's. Jason Khalid carried his privacy like a fortress. Even when he smiled, there was something untouchable in his gaze. Stella noticed it more when the laughter faded, in the way he avoided certain questions, how he flinched whenever someone mentioned loyalty. One night, while searching his library for a file, she found a photograph half tucked between two books. It showed Jason, younger, standing beside a striking woman in a white dress at what looked like an engagement party. The woman's hand rested possessively on his chest. His smile was polite, not happy. When Jason walked in, she turned the photo toward him. "You didn't tell me you were engaged before." He froze just for a breath. "That was a long time ago. What happened?" He took the photo from her and set it face down on the desk. "She left, the day before the wedding, with my business partner." Silence stretched. "I'm sorry," Stella said softly. He shrugged, but his eyes betrayed the wound. "Don't be. It taught me a useful lesson. Never mix affection with trust." She wanted to say not everyone leaves, but she didn't. The words caught behind her ribs. Instead, she simply nodded, pretending to understand. 2 weeks later, the storm hit. The first sign was a message from her publicist at 7 a.m. "We have a situation." Within minutes, her phone flooded with alerts. A gossip site had published a leaked voice recording of Jason's former fiancée, claiming Stella had bought herself a husband to secure her inheritance. The story spread faster than reason. Screenshots of the supposed contract trended on social media, edited to look official. Hashtags sprouted like weeds. Hash bought bride hash. Contract wife hash Maxwell money. By noon, the board of Maxwell Enterprises had scheduled an emergency meeting. In the penthouse, Stella paced as Jason stood by the window, phone to his ear, issuing instructions in his calm, surgical voice. "Track the source. No comment until we have proof. Pull advertising from any outlet running it." When he hung up, she was still shaking. "They'll believe her. They want to believe her. Then we change the story," he said. Her laugh cracked. "Oh, with what, Jason? Another set of wedding photos? A hand-holding video?" He crossed to her. "You think I don't care what they're saying?" "You don't look like you care," she snapped. "Your company will survive this. Mine depends on reputation." His expression hardened. "Do you think I married you for your money?" "I think we both made a deal we didn't fully understand," she said. "You wanted access. I wanted independence. And now you think I sold you an illusion." The room pulsed with tension. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Jason, people are saying I bought you." "And does that bother you because it's untrue?" he asked quietly. "Or because you wish it were that simple?" Her breath hitched. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then Jason did something she didn't expect. He reached for her wrist, drawing her closer. She resisted for a heartbeat, then found herself staring up at him, inches apart. "Stop letting them define this," he murmured. "We know what this is." "Do we?" He didn't answer with words. His hand slid to the back of her neck, his thumb tracing the pulse beneath her jaw, and then he kissed her. It wasn't polite, or rehearsed, or anything the cameras could have choreographed. It was raw, anger, confusion, attraction, all colliding at once. She tasted coffee and adrenaline, felt her heartbeat pound against his chest like it was trying to escape. When he finally pulled back, both of them were breathing hard. "Now," he said roughly, "tell me that was fake." She stared at him, unable to speak. Her mind screamed for distance. Her body betrayed her. "That's not fair," she whispered. "No," he said, voice low. "It's honest." He turned and walked out to the balcony, the night air swallowing him. Stella stood motionless in the center of the room, one hand against her lips, every nerve trembling. Outside, flashes from paparazzi cameras burst like lightning, reflecting off the glass. They had followed them home again. Somewhere down below, a journalist probably captioned those photographs with something about true love under pressure. But the truth was messier. The kiss hadn't silenced the lies. It had written new ones in their place. When she finally joined him outside, Jason was staring out over the lagoon, the city glittering like a promise they could never keep. "They'll stop talking eventually," he said quietly. "No," she replied, voice steadier now. "They'll just change the headline." He looked at her then, really looked, as if realizing for the first time that this woman beside him wasn't just a name in a deal. She was the only person capable of breaking every rule he had built his life around. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," he said softly. Stella met his gaze, the weight of the moment pressing like thunder before rain. Somewhere between the flashbulbs and the fallout, they had crossed an invisible line, and neither of them could go back. The morning the truth shattered everything. Lagos looked almost too peaceful. The lagoon was still, the air washed clean by a night of rain, and the city skyline shimmered like nothing cruel could possibly happen under so much light. Stella Maxwell stood at the edge of Jason's study, holding the printed bank statements she had just found in his drawer. The papers trembled slightly in her hands, not from shock, but from fury contained too long. She had been searching for a missing project file when she found them. What she discovered instead were records linking her inheritance trust, the funds meant to secure Maxwell Enterprises, to Colleague Capital Group's private merger deal. Jason had withdrawn several million from their shared marital account to stabilize his company, using her name and signature authorization. He hadn't told her. When he entered the room, jacket slung casually over one arm, he froze. The look on her face said it all. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. "From your drawer," she said, voice calm but razor-edged. "You didn't even hide it well." Jason set his jacket down. "It isn't what it looks like." "Oh?" She laughed sharply. "Because it looks like you used my inheritance to save your empire. Without asking. Without telling me. Without even pretending to care what it meant to me." His jaw flexed. The resort deal was collapsing. Payroll, investors, hundreds of jobs on the line. "I had to move fast." "So you used my money," she said. "Our contract marriage wasn't enough. You had to make me your financial savior too?" "Stella," he began, "you said yourself this marriage was a transaction at the start." "I acted like it was one." Her voice trembled now, anger fighting heartbreak. "You don't get to use that excuse. Not after everything we built. The mornings, the plans, the promises. Were those transactions too?" Jason ran a hand through his hair. "You think this was easy for me? You think I wanted to depend on anyone? I did it because I trusted you." "Trust?" she echoed, stunned. "You call this trust?" He took a step closer. "I was going to tell you, the night of the foundation dinner, but the press wouldn't let up. The board was breathing down your neck, and She cut him off, voice rising. "You lied to me, Jason. You used me to fix your empire. And now the same board that doubted me from the beginning will use this to destroy mine." He said her name in again, softer this time, but she was already walking past him. Her heels struck the marble like punctuation marks. "Where are you going?" "Out," she said, "to remember who I was before you turned me into an accessory to your ambition." By evening, she had moved into her late mother's old townhouse in Ikuye, quiet, classic, far from the glitter of Banana Island. She stripped out of her designer dress and into jeans, tied her hair up, and sat cross-legged on the bare floor with a glass of whiskey. The house smelled faintly of old paint and nostalgia. Her phone rang every few minutes, calls from journalists, board members, Jason's assistant, but she ignored them all. She needed silence. When it finally rang again, the caller ID read, Jason Khalid. She let it ring out. He called again, again. Finally, she answered. I don't want to talk, she said. Then listen, he said, voice raw. Yes, I used part of the inheritance, but not because I wanted to win. Because I couldn't stand watching everything I built collapse while I was learning how to love you. She went still. You call that love? It started as survival, he said, but somewhere between the press conferences and the mornings you made my coffee too sweet, I stopped thinking about the contract. I stopped thinking about terms. It was just you. Her breath caught. Don't do this, Jason. I know what it looks like, he continued, but I swear to you, I was going to pay it back before you even noticed. I never meant to betray you. But you did, she whispered. A long silence filled the line, heavy with everything they couldn't say. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. If walking away gives you peace, I'll sign whatever you need. But I won't stop telling you the truth. I love you, Stella, and I'd trade every contract I've ever signed for one more chance to love you honestly. She ended the call. Not out of cruelty, but because she couldn't breathe. The next morning, headlines screamed, Marriage Meltdown at Khalid Towers, and Maxwell Heiress moves out amid merger scandal. The board wasted no time. A formal letter arrived that afternoon, stating that due to marital instability, Stella's inheritance terms might be voided pending legal review. They didn't care about truth. They cared about optics. She read the letter twice, folded it neatly, and realized what it meant. If she annulled the marriage, she would lose the company her mother dreamed of seeing her lead. If she stayed, she risked losing herself. For the first time in her life, Stella didn't know which decision would hurt less. That evening, she drove to Maxwell Tower, the company's gleaming glass headquarters, intending to face the board. The security guard recognized her instantly and waved her through, though his eyes carried the pity she didn't want. She reached the conference floor to find Jason already there, standing at the end of the table with the executives who had once doubted her. He was defending her, fiercely. You can't void her inheritance based on a tabloid rumor, Jason said, voice like iron. Our finances are joint, and every transfer was authorized legally. She's the majority shareholder. Deal with it. When he saw her enter, his tone softened. Stella, she held up a hand. Don't. The board murmured awkwardly, then cleared the room under her cold gaze. Only Jason stayed behind. Why would you defend me now? She asked. You've done enough damage. Because I owe you the truth, he said, and because love doesn't stop being love when it makes mistakes. She looked away, blinking fast. You talk about love like it's a company you can fix. He stepped closer. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just a partnership that needs both people to stay when it stops being easy. Her throat tightened. You broke something I can't rebuild. Jason nodded slowly. Then I'll stand outside it until you decide if it's worth rebuilding together. He reached into his pocket and handed her a small folded letter. The original loan document she'd signed months ago, now stamped void. I paid it back, he said simply. Every naira. She stared at him, unable to speak. He turned and left the boardroom, his silhouette cutting through the glass reflection of Lagos at sunset. Gold bleeding into indigo. Power into silence. Hours later, Jason stood on the rooftop of Maxwell Tower, wind whipping through his hair as the city lights glittered below. The skyline looked endless. Echo Atlantic shimmering in the distance, bridges glowing like veins of light. He leaned against the rail, exhaustion heavy in his bones. For a man who once believed he could control everything, this was a new kind of defeat. His phone buzzed with unread messages, but he ignored them. The city murmured far below. Sirens, laughter, life moving on. He closed his eyes and whispered into the wind. I'd trade every contract for one more chance to love her honestly. The words disappeared into the night, carried away over the lagoon, where the world kept shining as if hearts didn't break above it. The storm broke at dawn, not in the sky, but in the headlines. Every major paper in Lagos splashed her name across the front page. Maxwell Heiress to address boardroom scandal today. By 8 a.m., the Maxwell Tower was surrounded. Cameras, journalists, curious onlookers. Everyone wanted a glimpse of the woman who had turned her inheritance into chaos and heartbreak into rumor. Inside her penthouse, Stella Maxwell stood before the mirror in a crisp white suit that glowed against her brown skin like armor forged from calm defiance. Her hair was swept into a sleek twist, her lips painted a quiet red that said more than any speech ever could. "Are you sure about this?" her assistant Grace asked nervously. Stella buttoned her jacket, eyes sharp. "I've been sure of very few things in my life," she said, "but I know this. Today, they don't get to define me." She left before Grace could respond. The black Rolls-Royce slid through the morning traffic toward Victoria Island, the air thick with anticipation and diesel and Lagos heat. Reporters shouted her name the moment the car door opened, flashes exploding like miniature lightning. Stella didn't flinch. She walked past them, chin lifted, every step deliberate. "Miss Maxwell, is it true your marriage was fake? Did Jason Khalid use your inheritance for profit? Are you filing for annulment?" She said nothing. The elevator swallowed her and her silence. Upstairs, the boardroom was already buzzing when she arrived. 12 men in tailored suits, 3 women in pearls and suspicion, and at the head of the table, Jason Khalid. He stood as she entered, his expression unreadable, his dark suit immaculate. For a moment, the air between them was pure voltage. "Mrs. Khalid," said one of the older directors, clearing his throat, "we appreciate your attendance. Given the media storm, it's crucial we address these allegations before they destabilize shareholder confidence." Stella set her handbag on the table and faced them all. "You mean before they destabilize your control?" Murmurs rippled around the room. Jason's gaze flicked toward her, a warning, or maybe admiration. Another director, a woman with a thin smile, interjected. "There are concerns regarding the legitimacy of your marriage to Mr. Khalid and how it affects your right to hold majority shares. The clause in your father's will was clear, that I must be happily married." Stella finished. "Yes, I remember." She turned slowly, letting her words sink into every corner of the room. "For months you've whispered that I bought a husband, that I'm a puppet playing CEO while the real power hides behind Khalid Capital. But since you're all so fond of transparency, let's be transparent." She reached into her bag and placed a copy of her father's will on the table. "My father's clause wasn't written to measure love. It was written to control it, to force me into a version of happiness that could be audited. And I went along with it because I thought survival required obedience." The board shifted uncomfortably. Cameras from the press, allowed in under her instruction, began to roll. Jason's brow furrowed. He hadn't known she'd invited the media. "Today," Stella continued, "I'm ending that narrative. This marriage wasn't a contract, it was a decision. Not because I had to be married, but because I chose to be, even when it was messy, even when it hurt." She turned toward Jason then, her voice soft but clear. "And I'm not ashamed of the man I chose." For a second, no one breathed. Jason rose slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "If I may," he said to the board, though his words were meant only for her. "You were right. I did use what was yours. I made mistakes trying to protect what was mine. But I've learned that love isn't a transaction you negotiate. It's a truth you stand beside, no matter the cost." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single folder, sliding it across the table. "These are the share certificates I acquired during the merger. I'm returning them to Maxwell Enterprises. No conditions, no loopholes." Gasps filled the room. "Jason," one board member sputtered, "this could cost you millions." "It's worth it," he interrupted, eyes on Stella. "Some things are meant to be built, not bought." The tension cracked like glass under heat. Stella felt her throat tighten, but she held her composure. Slowly, she extended her hand to him. He took it without hesitation, the simple gesture more binding than any legal document between them. Turning to the cameras, she said clearly, "You can print this. My marriage is real by choice, not condition. My company belongs to no one's permission but my own." Applause rose, not loud but sincere. Even the cynical faces at the far end of the table softened. In that moment, Stella reclaimed more than her inheritance. She reclaimed her dignity. Outside, the press swarmed again as they emerged side by side, the afternoon sun catching on the glass facade of Maxwell Tower. The journalists shouted questions, microphones thrust like weapons, but this time Stella smiled. Jason slipped his hand into hers. It wasn't for show, it was grounding. Two equals walking out of the storm they had built and survived together. A reporter yelled, "Are you staying married, Mrs. Khalid?" Stella paused on the steps, met the camera's gaze, and said, "We're not just staying married, we're starting over." The crowd roared, flashes popping like fireworks. Jason's fingers tightened around hers. When they finally escaped into the car, silence filled the cabin, thick, electric, and somehow peaceful. Jason exhaled, looking at her with that mixture of admiration and disbelief. "You just dismantled an entire board on live television." She smiled faintly. "You taught me how to negotiate, remember?" He laughed softly, shaking his head. "You taught me how to lose gracefully." As they drove through the streets of Lagos, dusk began to fall. The city glittered under the rising night. Echo Atlantic's towers like silver sentinels, the lagoon shimmering with reflected stars. They ended up on the balcony of his penthouse, where it had all begun months ago. The same view, but everything felt different. Lighter. Real. For a long while, neither spoke. The wind tangled her hair. His hand found hers again. Below them, the city hummed with life, a reminder that tomorrow would still come, and love somehow had survived the fire. Finally, she turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "So, what are we now?" Jason studied her, the lights of Lagos painting gold across his face. "Not a deal," he said softly. "A beginning." She smiled, eyes glistening. "Then let's begin properly." He tilted his head, smiling back. "How?" "By doing the one thing our contract forgot," she said. "Falling in love without a deadline." And when he kissed her, slow, steady, certain, it wasn't about redemption or press releases or proof. It was about peace, the kind that comes when two people stop fighting for control and start fighting for each other. Far below, the city lights burned like 1,000 witnesses to their quiet vow. For once, Lagos wasn't watching a scandal. It was watching a story that finally found its ending. 1 year later, Lagos glowed like a jewel at midnight. The Echo Atlantic skyline shimmered with glass and promise, every tower reflecting the grand lights of the Alexander Khalid Foundation Gala, the night the city would celebrate a new beginning. Stella stood at the balcony of the event hall, a vision in silver satin that shimmered under the stars. Her hair cascaded in soft waves, her face calm but radiant. She could hear the laughter of guests inside, the clinking of champagne glasses, the hum of anticipation before the press arrived for the closing photo call. It had been 12 months since the board scandal, since the day she and Jason had walked out of Maxwell Tower hand in hand. The world had called it a miracle, a masterstroke, a headline that turned into hope. But to Stella, it was simply the day they chose each other, for real this time. Behind her, the ballroom was alive with Lagos's finest. Investors, artists, journalists, philanthropists. A jazz quartet played low and smooth in the background. Every detail, the floral archways, the warm gold lighting, the delicate white lilies placed at each table, was intentional. The event was more than glamour. It was gratitude. The foundation they'd built together in the aftermath of their chaos had one goal: to give young Nigerians scholarships and mentorship in business, media, and arts, a place where ambition wouldn't need inheritance to survive. Jason found her on the balcony, slipping beside her like a quiet certainty. He wore a black tuxedo, no tie, his cufflinks glinting faintly under the Lagos moonlight. His presence still felt like gravity. "Speech time, Mrs. Khalid," he murmured. She turned, smiling. "You promised to stop calling me that in public. And miss watching the way you pretend not to like it?" His tone was teasing, but his eyes were tender. She shook her head, laughter bubbling softly. "You still think you're the charming one in this marriage?" "Not anymore," he said. You stole that title the day you dismantled an entire board on live television. They shared a look that said everything words couldn't. The battles fought, the trust rebuilt, the love that had survived its own fire. Then, hand in hand, they stepped back into the golden glow of the ballroom. The master of ceremonies smiled broadly as the applause rolled. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the couple who turned crisis into creation, Jason and Stella Khalid. The crowd rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. Jason guided Stella to the stage, his hands steady at the small of her back, the same place it had rested on their wedding day. But this time it wasn't for the cameras. Stella took the microphone first. Her voice, smooth and confident, carried through the hall like melody. When I stood here a year ago, she began, my life was divided between two words, love and legacy. I thought I had to choose one. Tonight, I've learned that the right kind of love doesn't take from you. It multiplies everything you already are. Applause rippled through the audience. Jason's gaze never left her. She continued, her tone softening. This foundation was born from failure. Our failure to trust, to listen, to believe that hearts can learn as much as minds. But we rebuilt. And every student we sponsor, every dream we protect will remind us that second chances aren't weakness. They're strength. The room went silent with emotion. Even the photographers paused. Stella smiled, stepped aside, and nodded to Jason. He approached the mic, clearing his throat, his usual composure tempered by warmth. When I met Stella Maxwell, he said, I thought she was chaos wrapped in calm. I was right. She turned my rules upside down and taught me that love isn't a contract. It's an act of courage. Tonight, I'm proud not just of the work we've done, but of the woman who made me believe in something greater than power. The crowd erupted in applause again, a wave of admiration sweeping across the hall. As the MC invited them to sign the founding charter of the foundation, an attendant brought forward a black leather folder and 2 gold pens. Stella and Jason stood side by side, fingers brushing as they signed their names beneath the words, the Alexander Khalid Foundation, building futures, not fortunes. The applause was thunderous. Outside, the terrace doors opened, and a young intern hurried out, holding a sleek envelope. Mr. and Mrs. Khalid, the press is waiting for your joint statement before the fireworks finale. Jason smiled. Tell them we're coming. He turned to Stella. One last signature? She grinned. You mean the one that isn't on paper? He tilted his head, amused. Always the negotiator. Always, she said softly. They walked together through the glass doors, stepping into the humid night air. Lagos stretched out before them, its skyline glowing, the lagoon shimmering under bursts of reflected light. Fireworks began to rise over the water, silver and gold streaking the sky like blessings. The cameras flashed as they reached the podium. Stella's heart raced, not from nerves, but from gratitude. A year ago, she'd stood before a different crowd in the same city, broken and defiant. Now she stood beside a man who had learned to love without walls, and she was finally free to breathe. Jason took the microphone first. This city taught us both that success means nothing without service. Tonight, we dedicate this foundation not to our names, but to the dreamers of Lagos, the ones who will come after us. Then Stella stepped forward, her hand sliding into his. And to the idea, she said, that love, when built on truth, can outlast even the toughest conditions. The fireworks exploded higher, gold fountains lighting the lagoon, red spirals painting the clouds. The crowd cheered and flashes filled the night. Jason leaned close to her ear, his voice low amidst the chaos. Remember what I told you the night everything fell apart? She smiled faintly. That you'd trade every contract for one more chance to love me honestly? He nodded. I wasn't exaggerating. She looked up at him, eyes gleaming with light. Good, because you got that chance, and you didn't waste it. He bent his head, kissed her gently, and the noise around them faded until there was only warmth and color and the pulse of 2 hearts that had found home. Below, the city roared its approval, horns blaring from the bridges, laughter echoing across the water, as if Lagos itself was celebrating them. When the last firework cracked open the night in a final blaze of gold, Stella whispered, "So this is forever?" Jason smiled, his thumb brushing the ring on her finger. "No contracts, no conditions, just us." She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder as the lights faded to embers. For the first time in years, the world was quiet. And above the lagoon, where business had once begun and love had once broken, the two who'd turned scandal into something sacred finally signed their last promise, not on paper, but in each other's hearts.